My friends, good day. In May 2012, the Russian manufacturer Sukhoi was launching a promotional campaign for its public transport aircraft, the Superjet, the Su-100E. You should know that Sukhoi is mainly known for its fighter jets. But this time, with a consortium of foreign companies, they had built the Superjet and they were promoting it, especially during that season, in Asia. So they sent test pilots, technicians, and also salespeople with order books. They sent them to visit 6 countries. Laos, Pakistan, Vietnam, and Indonesia were actually part of this series of demonstration flights. So one thing, they arrive in Indonesia, but actually it wasn't the plane that first departed Moscow. That is, the plane they used at first gave them quite a few technical problems. As they moved through Asia, there were breakdowns, incidents, oil leaks, all that. So at one point, they decided to quickly return to Moscow, get a second plane, and come back to continue their journey. It's just a detail, but it's an important one because this kind of situation will erode trust. That means here we have a brand new plane, but it's already acting up. So we're a bit wary, we're being careful. They arrive at an airport near Jakarta and plan 2 flights. The flight plan is filed not by the pilots, but by a ground handling company. There are many companies present on different platforms and they take care of everything. They can take care of catering, the flight plan, fuel, the taxi to the hotel, all of that. They handle all that part, let's say the logistics, that surround the flight of such an aircraft. So they give the flight plan to a dispatcher from this company who then goes to the operations office to submit it to the attendant. What does he do? He gets the plan, goes to his computer and types away. Departure from Jakarta, return from Jakarta, that sort of thing. He has a problem when entering the information. The model of the plane, when he types in SU, Dash system suggests 30 SU-30, but SU isn't available. Under. How does he scratch his head? What's that? They made a mistake. In my system, I only have SU. All right, okay, I confirm. Let's go for U. So he's going to enter SU-30. The system didn't know about the SU-100 because it was a device that had just come out, but probably also because the system might not have been completely up to date. So what's the bottom line? It's that at the air traffic control service, so the air traffic controller, who will be handling this aircraft at various times, well, we're going to communicate the fact that it's a military aircraft, that it's a fighter jet, and that's a small mistake at first, but it will be important later on. He should have entered something like Airbus A320 or Boeing 737 or whatever, but not SU, because that completely changes the category of the aircraft. So, our pilots do a first flight in the morning, and when they come back, something bothers them. Nothing serious, really. But he comes in following the air traffic controller's vectors. He comes in too far from the runway. So, this gives them a descent slope during the approach that's pretty steep for their liking, so it forces them to make an approach with the landing gear. Spoilers deployed, all that, it's not very comfortable. There's nothing wrong or unsafe. They're just there to show the aircraft's comfort and other features. And when they have decision makers, potential clients, airline executives on board, they'd like to make approaches that are a bit more elegant. It's just a detail, nothing at all. So, on the second flight of the day, the pilots say to themselves, we won't get caught like we did this morning. I feel like making a relaxed approach. Okay, so they take off, make a few turns to the right, to the left. A short half-hour flight. At the base, there are 45 people, 45 in total on the plane. There are 4 airlines represented who have sent chief pilots, executives, pilots, all of them. And they also have journalists. The journalists came because, well, this kind of moment is marketing. Journalists should be allowed to film, take photos, and visit the cockpit since it's all advertising. So, at one point, our pilots are at about 10,000 feet. They're in the cockpit, and they have a local pilot with them. So it's a pilot from a local airline, and he's also a potential customer. So with this pilot, they're having a conversation about the aircraft. And so the pilot, who is basically a test pilot, an experienced test pilot, is demonstrating the systems to him, showing him different fuel pages, how to do a holding pattern, how to manage various systems. So he's showing that the plane is easy to fly, it's a modern aircraft that you don't really feel much, and so on. The pilot in question, who is a local pilot, lets them know during the conversation that the region is flat. They said that it's the flat country, which is not true at all, which is not true either they weren't understood or it was lost in translation or whatever. But that's not true because yes, the region is flat, but more or less, it kind of reminds you of those fields where there's nothing at all. And then you just have a plane tree in the middle, and usually that's where the biker or the car ends up crashing. Yes, the region is flat except for a hill. Yes, there's a mountain there. There's a mountain in the middle, and this mountain, like very often, well, it catches the clouds, of course. You have some elevation, so you get a little bit of wind. The air is pushed upward, so it cools down as it expands because the atmospheric pressure is lower at the top, so the air cools as it rises. The moisture that's inside it, what does it do? It starts to saturate. For instance, if ground temperature is 19 degrees and dew point is 13 degrees, the difference is 6 degrees. There's a wind coming in, blowing upward 1,000 meters higher. We've lost about 6.5 degrees on average, which is the typical temperature drop per 1,000 meters in Earth's atmosphere. So, what happens? Our temperature, which was 19, will now drop to 12.5. The water and humidity will condense, forming clouds. That's why mountains often catch clouds, especially volcanic islands. When planes approach volcanic islands, how do they appear from a distance? Well, sometimes the ocean, the sky is blue, above the ocean there's nothing, and suddenly, in the distance, there's a big cloud, and it's rarely wrong. It's the island, with its volcano or its mountain, that catches the clouds in just this way. So, as I was saying, our pilots, this time wanting to make a more gradual, prettier descent, asked the controller for two things. They want to descend to 6,000 feet, and they want to do a 360, which means making a full circle. A 360 means you enter and exit on the same heading. They entered on 200, so they should exit on 200, but that's not what happens. So, the controller, when he sees that this plane wants to descend to 6,000 feet, he has an idea, he guesses why. Because why 6,000 feet there? Why couldn't they go lower? Because actually, in that area, below 6,000 feet, there's a restricted military zone, and the controller was used to planes like the Sukhoi 30, for example, belonging to the Indonesian military, usually coming into the area. They would arrive at 6,000 feet, then boom, disappear inside that zone, in that area where they regularly conducted exercises. So, when he sees the plane asking him to descend to 6,000 feet for him, it's consistent with what he's used to. And seeing that it's a fighter jet, nothing surprises him. It's something where everything seems to fit, so his mental image, which is wrong, still has elements that seem to confirm it. He clears them to descend to 6,000 feet. How do you perform a 360-degree turn in a Superjet 737 or Airbus A320? It's basically the same, except there's no button for a 360-degree turn or full loop. What you need to do, and what the pilots will do, is set the autopilot to heading mode, to the heading setting. At that point, when they set it to heading mode, the heading is displayed in the small window. It's 200 in this case. Well, it turns and then the plane will go to that heading. When you ask it now, there's one thing you can't do. Pilots, no matter the plane, whether it's a Superjet or something else, can't just take the knob and turn it click, 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 click. And going to 200 all at once means inputting 360 degrees at once. Why? If they do that, the device won't turn. It'll pretend to turn, then go back. Why? Because it says, I'm at 200 on heading 200, you're asking me to go to 200, well, I'm not turning. All right, so what should we do? The pilots turn the knob in the direction they want. Let the turn be made by entering a small value not exceeding 180 degrees, otherwise it will reverse the direction of the turn. So it's just making a random move like 90 degrees, 100 degrees, whatever, to the right. They regularly approach the heading they've temporarily entered. You need to keep making moves, adding regularly 3, 4, or 5 times until you reach 200. We give the plane a temporary heading, then add another before it arrives, repeating this process until the loop is complete. Okay, so that's how it's done then. Our pilots are having a big conversation with this visitor in the cockpit. And after a few pushes of the button, well, they forget. There's a step they forget, the last push they forget. That is to say, they had started at 200, they had entered several times, they had entered headings 3 or 4 times, and at one point, the last one was 174, but before the plane reached heading 174, they needed to add again to exit at 200. Well, they're going to forget because they're lost in the conversation. In that case, what does the plane do? Exiting the turn with a planned path, it maintains 200 at 6,000 feet heading directly for a mountain. During that time, the aircraft enters the clouds, so it's completely in the clouds, which are hiding the mountain. That's when it happened. There's only one device that can save them. It's the ground proximity warning system. Actually, the ground proximity warning system is a system that has 2 things. It has the global positioning system feed, so it knows where the plane is on Earth. And it also has a map. It has a map with the terrain elevations around the world, so it has a global terrain map. What does it do? It calculates the plane's position and trajectory looking straight ahead. Here, it sees that within 2 minutes, there's reason to believe that this plane is going to hit some terrain. It tells the pilot it's even smart enough to react. Even during a turn, that means if the plane is turning well, it will see how many degrees per second that turn is. And so, in this way, it's able to extrapolate and say, is that mountain, for example, on the right or on the left, is it a danger? Given this turn, it's a very intelligent system. At that moment, the system tells them to pull up. So now the system asks them to pull the stick, pull up, terrain, pull up. So they're a bit puzzled. They say, what's this thing doing? Do you think they've also lost confidence in the aircraft since they had to replace the first one? So normally, in a situation like this, they're in deep trouble. They're in the clouds in an area they don't know. On top of that, their maps, they receive maps for en route, which means en route maps are made for flying. High altitude, they don't show the terrain, whereas there are other maps for lower altitudes that do show the terrain. But in what they were given, they didn't have the maps with the terrain, so in reality, they had no idea what they were doing, these guys. And so what they should have done there is say, I have a ground proximity warning system alarm, my flight isn't properly prepared. All that, well, they shouldn't even have. Actually, you don't even have time to think about all that. If there's a ground proximity warning system alarm, you don't think about anything at all. You just say to yourself. After that, the reaction should normally be to push the side stick all the way and the throttle levers all the way forward, just 2 quick actions. And actually, since it's a fly-by-wire aircraft, which means it's an aircraft with electronic flight controls, it has envelope protection. Normally, in theory, on paper, if you push it all the way abruptly, it's not supposed to stall. So, normally, the system pitches it up enough to maximize lift, but without letting it go all the way to a stall. Our pilots aren't going to react that way. They're going to listen to the alarms going off. Pull up, there. He has 6 alarms that are going to sound. After that, the system switches to another mode. Which other mode? Is it going to tell them something? Avoid terrain. Why does it say that? Because at first, when it detected the mountain coming up, it sent out the alert. It will also show the mountain in red on their screen. Everything is clear. And it will tell them to pull up on the control stick to fly over it, but since they don't react after a while, they're too close to fly over it. There's a point where the system, knowing the plane's performance, recognizes that pulling up on the control stick now won't help as you won't clear it. It tells them to avoid the terrain, which means turn left, turn right, do whatever you can, But at that point, you have to avoid the terrain, not try to fly over it. Avoid the rainfire. What is the captain doing? And what's extraordinary, just by the way, it's this captain who is a test pilot, who is one of the first pilots to have flown the Superjets, who himself flew in the Caucasus, in the mountains, on purpose with the Superjet. To test the ground proximity warning system alarm thresholds and validate their operation, it was part of the certification tests. They had to go into the mountains. They go there on stormy or clear days, heading to the mountain and saying, look, see, the mountain is there. The ground proximity warning system will alert us and the mountain warning will appear. So he's the one who validated the ground proximity warning system, and even then he loses confidence. Apparently he's more influenced by someone he doesn't know, who knows neither Dave nor Adam. The visiting pilot told them it's flat country and the system is right ahead. He's going to make a move, he's going to take the ground proximity warning system buttons, click, 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 disables everything, he inhibits everything. There are airlines that, in certain specific situations, inhibit the ground proximity warning system, for example. You look at the ground proximity warning system, you look at Air Bhutan, who make approaches to Paro, which is an airport. To land there, you have to take an Airbus and weave through a canyon, weaving between mountains. And indeed, what they usually do there is, at the entrance to the canyon system, they say their prayer and then they stop. Ground proximity warning system can't stay on or it'll sound until landing, but this reaction makes no sense after that. We're literally in an incident. It feels like we're back in the 70s. We're in 2012. And he stops. Tick, tick, tick. A few seconds later, he gets another alarm. Since he turned off the ground proximity warning system, it no longer works. Then he gets a too low gear alarm. You're too low. You forgot the landing gear. The radio altimeter actually detected they were below 800 feet. And in this plane, there's this logic. If the plane is too low, well, you'll get an alert that says the landing gear isn't down. You're not in landing configuration. That means it's the plane that thinks we forgot to lower the landing gear. So, it's this detail. He stopped the EGPWS because he thought it was malfunctioning, that the card was faulty or something else. This detail will alert the captain and guide his actions. He will take the side stick and pull on it very gently. He'll pull it by 5 degrees. Why 5 degrees? No one understands. He pulls on it a little bit without even disengaging the autopilot, which means he did it instinctively. He grabs the side stick and pulls on it just enough for the autopilot to detect that there's an input on the side stick. As it disconnects, the autopilot doesn't like it when humans fight against it. So they tend to disconnect, so they disconnect. Then the co-pilot says, "What's that?" And actually, probably when he said, "What's that?" it was 2 or 3 seconds before the impact, because we're talking about these things, unfortunately, it was 3 seconds before the impact. With a vertical wall, it means the vertical wall had just appeared in his window, completely filling his window. It has an 85-degree incline, that means a person couldn't stand on it. And so the plane hits this wall, it explodes. 45 dead, instantly. The pieces, the fragments of the plane go tumbling down the mountain. Then, afterwards, silence falls again, and the air traffic controller takes 17 minutes before saying, "It's a Sutrant. Where is he?" Gone? Afterwards, we start searching. Then we realize we made a mistake, that it wasn't a fighter jet, but we think maybe he was. Likely. They wouldn't admit the obvious, saying it was hijacked. We believe it was, with hijackers on board who took control. We're waiting for a demand for information. We're waiting for a mysterious caller to contact us, aren't we? But really, the reality was much simpler. The weather was bad. They couldn't go because after the accident, the clouds only made the rain heavier, so they had to wait until the next day. The next day, the helicopter managed to get close to the side of the mountain and took photos, specifically of the wreckage of the aircraft. And they realized that it had crashed, so they went there to see and search. There were no more survivors at that point. That was not the issue anymore. It took them a week, and it was very hard, because they had to walk along a river on foot with ropes and rescue equipment. In the mountains, actually, and then after that, climb and all that to get there on foot. And then, well, realize that everyone is dead, and then try to recover the black boxes and everything at the crash site. And what maybe reinforced the hijacking theory? Well, as we say, yes, hijacking rather. What validated the hijacking theory during the first hours is that we thought that if it had crashed, we would have received the emergency signal. There was a distress beacon, it would have been triggered. In reality, the distress beacon was found, and under the impact, which is still a crash against a vertical wall. Well, it was damaged, not destroyed, but broken, and its antenna was torn off. That's why it didn't get triggered. In any case, there you have it. It's still quite a terrible story because there was a series of small coincidences. It's not working and needs to go back to Moscow. We're losing confidence. The other guy who doesn't know what he's doing, he fills it up, he puts the Sukhoi into the system. Little things like that, the local pilot who tells them it's flat, we don't know why he said that. The clouds that were there that day. So these are the little details that mean if we had removed each of these coincidences, the accident could have been avoided. That day, we ended up with a controlled flight into terrain, like the classic accidents of the 70s and 80s. In any case, my friends, thank you for watching this video up to this point. I also want to thank the people who support the channel on Patreon. Without them, this channel wouldn't have been able to come to life and keep going over the years. Thanks to them, and I'll see you in the next video.